Welcome to Pandora. Everything in Pandora is out to kill you and eat your eyes for jujubes.
Hi, I'm Dave.
Hi, I'm Doug.
And we are the co-authors of Solving Modern Problems with a Stone Age Brain, which takes a look at the 7 fundamental motives that my dad and his colleagues at ASU have written about as being the sort of, what would you say, the things that drive all human behavior?
Yeah, the kinds of the fundamental motives that deal with the problems that all of our ancestors had to solve and that we have to solve today as well.
All right. And today we are taking a look at how those motives show up in movies, specifically James Cameron's Avatar. So, hope you enjoy it.
Okay.
Go to the movies with a Stone Age brain to watch my heroes face down every gruesome pain and triumph over villains you and I disdain. Why do I love to feel this way?
So let's talk about Avatar. Avatar, when it came out, was the top-selling, film of all time, right?
I believe it still is.
It might be
Highest grossing film.
Right,
of all
highest
time.
grossing film of all time. But it sort of faced a little bit of a backlash. There were a lot of people who started saying, you know what, it's really, the only thing that makes Avatar interesting is the special effects, and there's really not that much to it other than the fact that it was in 3D.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I just watched it again yesterday, and I think it has kind of everything going on in terms of the big motivations that drive us in everyday life. They get amplified in movies, and Avatar certainly has that.
Right.
I mean,
So I think Avatar captures all 7 of these things, right? So do you want to say what those motives are?
So the motives are basically based upon what human beings face developmentally in their life. Going from the bottom, all human beings have always needed to solve the problems of survival and then self-protection, protecting themselves from the bad guys. Then affiliation, which in the movies is getting along, and then status, getting ahead, and then getting the girl or the guy. There's a whole new problem once you've acquired mates, is hanging on to mates, as many of us have learned. That's a slightly different problem. And then kin care at the top. From an evolutionary perspective, the purpose of all this is to bond together because human beings are very helpless and they need parental care. But humans also take care of their brothers and their sisters and their other family members, even if they don't have offspring. And so those are the motives, and the question that we're going to talk about today is how, in general, great films include multiple of these motives, and they frequently include a conflict between one or more of these motives. And I think Avatar is a great example of this. It has the survival theme going. They're living in this beautiful, lush environment, with lots of animals and beautiful plants, and we're often looking for those places in our lives. We're looking for beauty, and what beauty means to us is pretty much lushness and water and nice views. And Avatar is one of the most successful of all times. It takes a place and makes a place that's in some ways more beautiful than real human environments.
Right, yeah, no, and it's novel, right? It's more novel than anything we've ever seen. If you've seen nature documentaries, you've seen a lot of life on Earth, but this is but it also still all feels like life you would see.
It does
on
feel
Earth,
natural.
right?
It feels like you're in nature here.
And they're fighting over these lush environments, right? There's just the one tree, which I think is a very key thing for our ancient ancestors. You'd have this whole world, but there'd be these certain spots like water that would be
contested. And so another tribe would come over the hill.
Another tribe would come over the hill.
Living in this beautiful, lush environment. So then the next motive is self-protection. And then in fact, this is a good example of, 2 cultures basically the Navi have to protect themselves from these greedy capitalists who want to basically steal their living. And this is something our ancestors always had to deal with. And this movie captures it in an incredibly beautiful
It does.
way.
And the other thing that it does, we often talk about, in the modern world, self-protection being protecting ourselves from other humans, but they're also, in this world, it's a beautiful but dangerous world.
Yes, all these horrible monsters.
Right, so they're
flying dragons that can eat you, or also you can tame them.
Right, yeah, they sort of are opportunities and threats.
Those things running around also that are trying to attack him right at the beginning. The little
Yeah, so there's a really clear survival and self-protection.
Right, exactly.
But now let's move on to affiliation, right? Step 3 on our pyramid.
Right.
Because that is, I think, a really key one.
In this movie, so I would say it's represented a lot by Jake Sully, who is the main character. So he has to make friends. His job is to make friends with the Navi, because what they're trying to do is to basically get the Navi to leave peacefully so that they can exploit all of their resources.
So so not only does he need to make friends, he needs to pretend to be their friend, right? So he comes in, he knows nobody, right? And he needs to integrate himself with the soldiers. He needs to integrate himself with the scientists, and he needs to integrate himself with the Navi. And with almost every one of those groups, he's sort of asked to cheat on that group for the other groups.
So he's facing an interesting conflict, yes. Like when you have multiple groups of friends, loyalty is a big issue with friendship. Whose friend are you really? So yeah,
right. So he's got a really interesting affiliation problem, right?
Right.
And then status, right, which is our next one.
At the beginning of the movie, Jake some of the other soldiers even make fun of him for being in a wheelchair. The scientists are kind of mocking him because he's not his brother.
Right, he's not smart enough for the scientists, he's not tough enough for the soldiers.
Right.
And then when he does meet the Navi, like, she talks about him, the Tyria talks about him like a baby.
You're like a baby. I saw today.
He really has to struggle to get any respect, and in the end, he's at the top of the heap. And that's a theme throughout Hollywood movies. And you would think, well, it's a cliche, but well, no, it's what we all in our lives struggle with in some sense. We want to get some respect.
And one last thing with the status is he doesn't bully his way to the top of the Navi. He proves himself again and again.
If you want to make friends in real life, you want to do something for them. And he does a lot for these people in the end. At first he's sent out to take something from them, but then he ends up giving a lot to them, in fact. He goes over to help them protect themselves from the greedy capitalists. And he has to provide,
and he has to help them. And which is really interesting because this dynamic of moving into another tribe, right, and being seen as a threat and having to show, wait, I am actually going to provide, is probably a classic dilemma.
It is probably. It happened throughout. In ancestral times, people would move around from tribe to tribe. Not frequently, because it was scary and dangerous, because the Navi wanted to kill him. A lot of times in the ancestral environment, if you encountered a new group, they would have wanted to kill you. Yeah. But sometimes we became friends.
Right. And also, this would often happen with the next
mate acquisition.
Him falling for her. If there was one theme in this movie, right, that it's
a giant one, yes.
It's the romance between these two. Right, he has to show to her that he's confident, but she also brings a lot to the table.
She's incredibly competent.
She's incredibly competent. She's also incredibly socially integrated, right? She brings the group.
She's a good catch.
Yeah. But she's also very different from him, right? Like, it takes a little while for him to sort of come around to this idea of, all right, I'm gonna move in with her family, right?
Right. And this has probably always been something that typically in your village you would only have your brothers and sisters and first cousins, and so you'd marry somebody from the next village down. And I think typically the woman moved. Although humans, there's a term that anthropologists use for, patrilocal and matrilocal. I'm not sure, but there's, I think humans mostly, the family stayed patrolocally near the father, but often they were matrilocal. And so it could have been the male or the female who had to move out of the group. And so this is probably a primal thing that
Right.
our ancestors had to do, probably on both sides. Some of our female ancestors moved to new groups, and some of our male ancestors moved.
Well,
to new
also,
groups.
I think if you're a male and you're moving, if you're going to be betrothed to a sort of high status, bride like
Mhm.
this, you really are gonna need to prove yourself, right?
Right.
Because she controls the territory.
Right. In fact, he has to even outcompete another guy. He has to compete the guy who was betrothed to her.
And not only does he outcompete that guy, he has to then win that guy over again, right?
Right.
So this is one of these where we go back to our pyramid. He's balancing, right?
Right.
Both mate acquisition,
And friendship. Yeah.
right? Mate acquisition and affiliation, right?
Mhm.
And so,
You like to point out often that these motives often they often involve trade-offs with one another. Like you don't want to step on your friends' heads, too heavily, or you won't be their friend anymore.
and so let's also mention in terms of Jake's thing, right? So he sort of wins over Natiri, right? And we can tell she kind of likes him a little before. We didn't have any of her other tribe members, so now we're gonna have Sigourney Weaver double for her mom here. He has to win over her family, right? So and this is actually part of our sixth motive of mate retention, right? It's like once you meet somebody and you like them, sort of becoming integrated into their life, and
It's interesting what you say, because typically people think about mate retention as doing nice things for your partner, but you also have to sell their friends and their family on you.
Right,
Because your friends and family have destroyed relationships. We don't like this person. We don't trust this person. And so he definitely has to make it with the rest of her group as well.
Yeah, and so right in the middle, right, there's also this whole meet the parents subplot, right? And they really do, they're the leaders of the tribe and they make the decision. So this combines sort of our last two motives, because from their point of view, it's kin care, right? They're trying to decide who their daughter should pair off with. Should she pair off with this outsider who they can't quite trust, but who seems to maybe have pretty good genes,
Great
right?
power.
Yeah.
Right.
Or should they pick somebody they trust a little more? And so he's got to completely win them over. And eventually he does, right? Eventually, I believe, towards the end of the movie, the mom, he's all tied up, and the mom is the one that comes and cuts him free, right? And she's like, if you can help us, help us. So
If you are one of us, help us.
It's got all those things. I just watched the trailer for the new one, and it looks like she becomes pregnant, and there's a baby.
There's a kid.
There's probably going to be a lot about taking care of the baby, and so kin care is going to pop up more in the next one of these.
yeah. So let's go back to this question of what was it that made Avatar so successful?
Well, I think it is. I mean, when I watched the movie, I think it was the beautiful, lush world that they created, and I fell in love with the blue woman.
Sure.
So the romance was a big part of it.
And you mentioned several times you kind of hate
I hated the bad guy. I think it got me on all. I hated the bad guy. I love seeing Jake do well
Right.
for himself.
Yeah, I liked. I remember, especially the first time I saw the movie, the friendship dilemma really got me. Where I was like, man, how are you going to get these people to move the tree? Because I really was feeling like the bad guy that we hate at the end offers him a pretty good deal, and he shows he's loyal. He's like, I take care of my own, and I'll get you your legs back, right? And also, he's kind of charming, right? He's like
At the beginning.
At the beginning, yeah, he really is, and he's the guy who seems to like Jake the most. And so this cheater determining who your friends
that's
are.
true, right? Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
Right.
In some sense, what it does and what good movies do is it created a fictional world in which the real stuff is actually amplified. They purified the essence of stuff that happens in real life in a fantasy way, and I think movies do that. I think fiction in general can do that, and movies can do it in a beautiful visual way.
Yeah, that's true. When I go to a movie, right, having gone to film school, so much of the time I am thinking about the writers in the writers' room. I'm thinking, why'd they make this decision? Why'd they make that decision? I love when I'm watching a movie and I forget all of that and I just think, what are these characters going to do? And this movie, for me, did such an amazing job. I remember the first time I saw it, and I didn't even see it in 3D, actually. I saw it in 2D. But I was like, what is he going to do, right? What is she going to do? What is the bad guy going to do? And I think part of what, as I've thought about this movie more and more, and argued online that it really is not just the special effects that make it great, I think it is that it taps into these primal motives so well. The world brings you in immediately because it's lush and green and you're looking around and there's always threats and resources in every frame. You know, there'll be like beautiful flowers. There's even a shot of a bird that's flying by, this bright purple bird flying by the helicopter, and then it like snarls, right? And so the bird is simultaneously like, oh, that looks like that bird might be delicious, and also that bird looks like it might think I'm delicious, right? So it just brings you into this in such an intense way. And then it hits each one of these things. It hits the affiliation motive so hard. It hits the romance motive so hard. It hits the getting along with your partner's family, you know, mate retention. It just hits every one of those 7 fundamental motives again and again and again.
So there you have it. Thanks for joining us, and check out the book if you want to find out how to use these motives in your everyday life, or if you're trying to think of ways you could include them in things you're writing, whether it's the next Avatar or whatever you like. So, bye.
Going to the movies with a Stone Age brain. To watch my heroes face down every gruesome pain. And triumph over villains you and I disdain. Why do I love to feel this way? Go to the movies with a Stone Age brain. Might plot a murder with some stranger on the train. Fall in love as I go sing the rain. My Stone Age brain gets carried away. Going to the movies with a Stone Age brain. Sophia Coppola and Keenan Ivory Wayans. Imagine worlds that we will help you to explain. It's oh so human to feel this way.
I like that one.
That's good enough. Yeah, that's better than nothing. Well, maybe we'll work it out if you